Hi, this is David with Brazos Valley Barbell, and today we're going to be talking about top sets in training and how and when we should utilize these for the best results. So, top sets, just for a definition, is just going to be any set that I do that is heavier than my regular working sets and is meant to drive intensity a little bit. So, for example, that may be that if my programming says that I have sets of 5 today on squat, I work up to a top set of 5 that's harder than the rest of my sets. And then the rest of then I do maybe 4 more sets of 5 at a lower intensity. So the top set is basically just I'm putting my hardest set before the rest of my sets. So reasons that we would want to do this. For powerlifting, specificity is going to be the biggest deal. So that means that I need to lift the most weight. And so in that case, building in top sets into my training gives me practice with heavier weight. Where in this case, if using the example of that 5 sets of 5, at the end of those 5 sets, my reps are starting to get very challenging, and the reps are starting to be intense, but the loading is just not as heavy. So to be the best at powerlifting, you actually have to be, or it's useful to be practicing lifting the most weight in your training as well. So that doesn't always mean maxing out, but it does mean getting some experience with heavier loads consistently. So it gives us an opportunity to actually push the weight on the bar, regardless of whatever the intensity built into the day. So another reason right there, in the same regard, is overload, is that it gives me an opportunity to be progressing my loading, where it may be hard if I'm in a general strength or a general hypertrophy phase, to be regularly seeing increases of weight on the bar. The top sets give me an opportunity to set records and for personal records. If I'm going into a day and I have a little bit more motivation now to hit that top set of 8, I'm going to be progressing those weights regularly, and then I can back off a little bit and get my volume work done with the lighter sets afterwards. But it just gives me an opportunity to continue to progress as far as overload goes and to see progress in my lifts from an intensity standpoint. So autoregulation in this regard would mean that it gives me an opportunity to see if I'm actually getting better. So through training, obviously, the goal is to be getting stronger. So if I'm doing a good job of overload, if I'm building up to a set of 5, and we'll say my first week I did 400 for a set of 5, my second week maybe 410, 415, and then my last one, it gives me a chance to push that weight. And so if all of that goes really well, that gives me some feedback as far as how my training is going. If I build up to a new 5 rep max of 440 pounds on my squat, and that beats my last one by 10, I may be able to increase all of my working loads and then see some progress. The other thing that it also does is it gives me feedback as to when I need to pull back on my training as well. So with the first example, if I started off with 400 on my squats and then I did 410 or 420, and I was unable to match that or beat that on my 3rd week of training, obviously that tells me that through those weeks of training, my training was it had too much volume or it was too intense. I just wasn't recovering well. So it gives me more feedback on how my training is going on a regular basis and tells me when to go up and when to go down without having to max out to know if my training is working. So it also gives us an opportunity to increase our technical mastery under heavier loading and also under lighter loading. So the good thing with top sets is that we can kind of split what the days look like. So I work up to my heaviest set. It gives me practice with that heavy loading. So again, from specificity, I build up to a 5 rep max or a 3 rep max or whatever it is. I get practice actually executing heavier weight. And then after that, we generally will drop down those sets. So instead of 5 sets of 5 at 80%, we do 1 set of 5 that's near max effort, and then maybe 4 sets of 5 at 75 or 77%. And that gives me an opportunity to really execute those reps with good technique and not lose positioning. And so then both of those together can really help carry over to where I'm executing maximal loading very, very effectively. So the last one, I think in reasons that we would want to utilize top sets would be in fatigue management. So going along with autoregulation, the fatigue management gives us an opportunity in training to split our days up. So like I said right before, was that I can build up to where my heaviest set is first, and then I actually get to where I'm doing lighter sets or easier sets, at least for a few of those sets before my fatigue in that training session builds up on me. So top set of 5 would be my hardest set, and then let's say in the first week of training, I'm doing 4 sets of 5 at 75%. None of those those sets in that training session should be very, very challenging. So it gives me an opportunity to still build my volume while feeling some intensity and be fresh going into the next week and the week after, to where I'm really going into those overloading weeks of my training and have some good feedback as far as where I am. But if I had to push all of those percentages up a little bit so that I would have heavier loading throughout, that the 5 sets of 5 at 77-80% is much more fatiguing than splitting it up to where I only have one hard set and then easier sets after it. So it gives us an opportunity to recover a little bit better from training while still building in intensity. So application with this, what I have over here is going to be maybe a different example of different blocks. So we can and should be using these still during my hypertrophy blocks. So the first example is going to be just maybe a week 1 of a volume block. So I have one set of 8 at an RPE of 8. So it's not a super challenging set of 8, but it's going to be something that I should progress from week to week and hopefully be building up to maybe an 8 rep max on my 3rd or 4th week of training. And then the 4 sets of 8 at 65% is not a very challenging workout after it, but again, this may be something that you're trying to acclimate to the volume as well. But it's still, we get 5 sets of 8, which would be a pretty high volume workout, but we still build in the intensity, and it allows me to drop those down a little bit so that I'm not incredibly sore and that I can repeat that process again. In my strength block, the loads are going up, but I use the example again of the 5 sets of 5 workout. So the top set, I put it at 8.5. Generally, the top sets are going to be anywhere between, I would say at least 7 as far as RPE if you're doing a top set, but 7 all the way up to 9.5, 10 RPE if you're pushing hard in that regard. So with the rep maxes. So then after that, at the 4 sets of 5 at 77%. Again, that's kind of a standard workout. It's not crazy as far as volume. It's not crazy as far as intensity. But this workout obviously could still be built into training regularly and recover from very well. And then in the peaking process, we're getting into the singles and doubles. And so I work up to a heavy single at 8.5, maybe around what my second attempt would be or something like that, followed by my heavier loading at 4 sets of 2 at 85%. And I'm using that as an example. That's that workout right there is not super intense, and it's not there's not a whole bunch of volume there either. But I can obviously use heavier loading and then still manage my intensity, my fatigue a little bit better. So last thing would just be some considerations as far as specifically the individual lifts and how I think that they respond to those top sets and how to utilize them best. So squats, I think, are the most versatile. Squats tend to respond well to those 8 rep maxes and 5 rep maxes, and really all across the spectrum. We can do a bigger variety of squatting as far as the top sets and loading and those kind of things, and it tends to work pretty well. So there's just a lot of options there. Bench press and deadlift are not so much the same, where I have to be a little bit careful with both of these. I think bench press, the main consideration is generally we're bench pressing more frequently. A lot of my athletes are bench pressing 3 and 4 times a week. I don't want to be including 2, 3 top sets a week when they're bench pressing almost every day in their training, and it just ends up to where that impacts their training a little bit more and violates the autoregulation, the fatigue management. So with those, I still include the top sets, and I include them relatively frequently, but I may lower the rep ranges in them. I've found that I don't like top sets on bench press that are really above 5 and mostly above 3. I just don't like including them. Well, especially in the volume phases, we'll build in some 6 rep maxes or 8 rep maxes and those kind of things, but I don't expect those to go very well. Bench press, I think, fatigues very quickly, and so just on a single set basis, is that you just may not at 80%, you may have a hard time actually getting to that 7, 8 reps. Where on something like squat or deadlift, you may be able to match that pretty well. So with bench press, I tend to use the lower rep ranges generally in training, but still relatively frequently with the top sets, but I manage the intensity a little bit more. Deadlift, the biggest deal is how fatiguing it's going to be. So even though we're only deadlifting maybe 1 or 2 times a week in training, I still don't like rep maxes on a weekly basis in training. So generally what I'll do is I'll build up to a top set single, and I think the best word for it would just be an overwarm single. So I warm up maybe just past whatever my working loads would be, and it gives me some exposure to heavier loads, but then I can back down and do my loading, my volume work, and still have had that exposure with the heavier weights. The deal with that with deadlifting too is the weights are just generally going to be the heaviest. So I don't need to push super high into the intensity to still get the exposure that I need with the heavier weights at that point. So the deadlifting, what I've been doing recently with my programming is an overwarm single for a few weeks and then building up on my last week, my overreaching week, to a rep max with the intention of basically having that be hard to recover from and then deloading the following week. But if I were doing rep maxes on deadlift every week, that would make it to where my squat training, my bench press training, and the successive weeks on my deadlift training just not going well. So we need to be most careful with deadlift. I just don't think bench press training represents itself well with the higher reps on your top sets. And squats, I think there's just a lot of options with it. So hopefully you liked the video. Subscribe to the channel if you have any questions or anything. Leave me a comment. Send me an email if you have any questions about my coaching that I do. David at Brazos Valley Barbell, or you can go to our website. It's just brazosvalleybarbell.com for more information. But thanks for watching.